XS Wireless Digital is the perfect wireless audio solution for content creators and filmmakers. Thanks to a 2.4 GHz transmission, XS Wireless Digital is a truly plug-and-play system that allows you to upgrade your in-camera audio with one-button operation. With a variety of configurations to choose from, this entry point into the world of wireless will improve your workflow and will expand the possibilities of how you capture audio for your video. For more information, visit sennheiser.com/XSWD.
The new Super 35 sensor that Canon have introduced with the C300 Mark III is quite a big step up from other S35 sensors that they have created before. From the body and the flexibility that gives us in terms of the expansion packs and the interchangeable mount, to the sensor with its increased dynamic range for tackling scenes that possibly we couldn't have tackled or captured faithfully before, I can get more out of this camera. My money goes further. It's as simple as that from a business standpoint. From a creative point of view, it's unquestionably unlocking more creative avenues for us as filmmakers.
XS Wireless Digital is the perfect wireless audio solution for content creators and filmmakers. Thanks to a 2.4 GHz transmission, XS Wireless Digital is a truly plug-and-play system that allows you to upgrade your in-camera audio with one-button operation. With a variety of configurations to choose from, this entry point into the world of wireless will improve your workflow and will expand the possibilities of how you capture audio.
Hello everyone, welcome to ProAV Live and welcome to our very informal weekly little Q&A session. Thank you so much for joining me for this. As always, I'm just going to start with a few little updates on what's been happening in the world of ProAV over the last week since the last one of these that we did, a few product announcements, things like that, and a few little sort of company update things if you like. And then we will head on to answering any questions that you guys may have. So if you're new to these, all you need to do to influence which way the chat goes and all the rest of it is to leave a something in the live chat on YouTube or in the comments on Facebook, and I can see all of that here on my laptop in front of me. And these streams are very much just me talking directly to you and you talking to me. We talk to each other through that chat, and that is the main, other than those little product updates for the beginning just to get us going, that is the only thing I've got prepped for this stream. We're very much just here to actually answer any questions that you all may have. So it's actually been quite an exciting week, really, at ProAV. We have had, obviously, the Sony A1, which was launched a couple of weeks ago, but we had our first hands-on with the Sony A1, which we made a product video about. We only had it for a day, so we didn't have it for very long at all. Actually, the first question has come in from Mickey Mac saying the Sony FX3, is it real? Anyone that hasn't seen that, there's lots of leaks going on at the moment and rumours on Sony Alpha Rumors and all the rest of it about a new Sony camera called the Sony FX3. I don't know whether it's real. The way that these product releases work is either I genuinely don't know anything, like I did with the A1. Before the A1 was released, I genuinely had no idea what the product was at all, or I do know and I'm under NDA, so I can't tell you that I know, and we'll have something go live whenever it goes live. So either way, I don't know and I can't tell you. From the leaks though, it looks like an interesting little camera, so I'm excited to see more about it and to see what people think of it and all the rest of it. But the A1 is real. The A1 we have used, and it is incredibly impressive, this camera. I mean, yes, it does cost a decent amount of money. That's Canon 1DX levels of cost there, with at $6,500 ink VAT. But it is pretty much the best stills camera that Sony have ever made. It is the most complete hybrid camera that Sony have ever made. That just being able to jump from 15 megapixel stills at 30 frames a second instantly over to recording 8K video is absolutely fantastic. I mean, yes, things like the R5 can do that, but the R5 can't do anywhere near as much 8K as this without overheating. The R5's 8K is better quality because it can do 8K RAW, and the normal 8K is also fantastic. This 8K has to be an H.265, and it is quite low compressed for 8K, so it's either 400 or 200 megabits a second. But to be honest, that just helps it be actually usable to use. And you combine those sorts of data rates where you can get quite a lot on even a V60 SD card. You don't even need V90 for the 200 megabits a second. So it makes it quite a practical 8K workflow, as long as you've got a computer that can actually churn through that H.265, because H.265 is pretty processor intensive, so you are really going to want something like a new Apple M1 or one of the real latest Windows computers that are going to be able to handle that H.265 footage. But yeah, the main thing with the A1 that I was so unbelievably impressed with is that the image quality seems just as good as the A7S Mark III. Now, that does sound a little bit strange to say, because the A7S III costs nearly half the price of the A1. So, of course, the A1 is meant to be better. But when a camera is that good on the still side, you would normally see some compromises on the video side. Whereas the A7S, the reason the A7S has always been what the A7S has been is because the still side of the camera has been lacking down at 12 megapixels. And, you know, it's not the 20 megapixels from the A7 line. It's not the 40 and 50 from the A7R and all the rest of it. And that's how they've been able to make the video so good. Whereas here they've managed to do both. And that is so impressive. Even up at really high ISOs, the A1 is good. It's really good. Really good. And the 4K pixel bit and just normal 4K recording looks just as detailed and as clean as the A7S does at normal high ISOs. So the A1, if you can afford and you do enough work to justify the price of that, that is an incredible workhorse camera if you need to quickly jump between highest level stills and good video. The other big news this week was Atomos. In fact, I've seen some questions come in to, Takiri Music. I'm excited about the Atomos Ninja 5 Pro Kit for my FX6. Would love a ProAV RAW workflow tutorial. We can certainly look at doing some things on ProAV RAW. That might be something that I could maybe do a stream where I get an influencer on who's got my experience of using it actually on jobs and talk through that. Maybe someone like Ollie Kensington to do a ProAV a Final Cut tutorial or something like that. But for those who haven't seen, Atomos have basically enabled SDI RAW recording on the Ninja 5. Now, you need a few bits and bobs to get that to work. So, obviously the Ninja 5 by itself doesn't have any SDI inputs. It's HDMI only. So this little box here on the left is the Atomos SDI expander module. And if you plug that in, you'll get SDI in and SDI out on your Ninja 5. And then there's an activation license from Atomos as well. So on Atomos's website, down here at the bottom somewhere, here. So they've got a new section on it about RAW over SDI activation. Costs $99, and you log into your own portal on Atomos, so myatomos.com, and you can purchase the license there. So as long as you've got the hardware, which you can get from us, this activation code is all you need. But this Pro Kit bundle already has that activation code in. So if you haven't got a Ninja 5 already, all you need to buy is this Pro Kit and you're ready to go to record either HDMI RAW or SDI RAW, do whatever you want. If you've already got a Ninja 5, you need the Atomos SDI expander module, and you need to go purchase that activation code from Atomos. And then you'll be able to record RAW over SDI. So that enables the RAW out of cameras like the FX6 is the big one, but also the FX9 if you do have the XDCA back. And then the Panasonic, so the VariCam LT and the EVA 1, they all send RAW out over SDI, so as do some of the older Canons, so the C300 Mark II, and which is what I'm using right now, and the original C500. They send RAW over SDI as well. So the Ninja 5 can now record all of them, which is so good because it is so much nicer having a Ninja 5 on the top of your camera to enable something like RAW, especially when you're out and about a lot. Simply because the Shogun 7, as lovely a screen as it is, it's a lovely screen, a big 7-inch screen. It is quite big, and so therefore it does add a lot of weight and bulk to your setup. Plus, because of the way it's designed, it means that the batteries hang on one side. So you combine that with the physical larger side, and you do get quite a large and clunky thing. So Andy says, so annoying it won't allow RAW over HDMI like the A7S Mark III, etc. What are you saying won't allow RAW over SDI? Because the A1 does, and the Atomos Ninja 5 does. So that Ninja 5 can already record RAW over over HDMI from the A7S Mark III. Unless you know something I don't, but almost certain it can. So yeah, that is a really exciting news because we've been asking for that for a long time from Atomos. The other thing which we got is this little panel, which is next to me. So this is the Lupo Kick-Ass panel, which is a name which, I'm not going to lie, I'm not a fan of. But it's certainly different. Basically what this is a RGB version of the Smart Panel, which is pretty much my favorite little light right now on the market. We use it, the Smart Panel, all the time as a backlight for my P-Sta cameras. If you watched our video. So this one here on the right, our equipment for YouTube 2021, that one. We use that all the time on a little boom arm, e-image boom arm, to just boom behind me to get that backlight in the ideal placement right behind my head. And it's perfect for a backlight because it's so bright, because these beams on the front focus the light. The Kick-Ass panel isn't going to be as bright as that smart panel, but it gives you full RGB functionality, and it is, you know, nearly as bright and nearly as small. It is a bit bigger and it isn't quite as bright, but it's nearly as bright. And, you know, it does make a difference. So this, I mean, if this was something like the Aperture MC or something like that, one of the other really popular ones, I don't think it would be hitting the background in this sort of piece to camera. I mean, this is a lit set. I've got some quite bright lights pointing at me right now, and yet this is overpowering the background, just like this other RGB one that I've got here doing the orange splash behind me, and it's hitting the wall. I don't think the Aperture MC or any of the other little RGB lights would be powerful enough to do that. You know, it's quite a bright light, even if the smart panel is brighter. It's a very, very interesting little light, and having RGB in a backlight like this is really useful, because if you're doing an interview or a piece to camera with something behind you that's of color, so for example in this setup, if I had that bulb on an RGB, I might want my backlight to be matching that, so that my backlight, you know, it ties it all together a little bit. Or if I was in front of a bar, you know, and there was neon lights behind me, having those neon lights coming through on the backlight would be a really nice way of bringing in that little subtle hints of RGB into your scene without having like a RGB fill or a key light or something really extreme like that. It's a very nice subtle way to do it and add a bit of interest. So yeah, really recommend that light. I'll probably be making a video on it at some point soon and show you the brightness levels, but difference between the smart panel and the Kick-Ass panel and all the rest of it. So yeah, if you missed what that was, that's the Lupo Kick-Ass panel. So yeah, it's £300 ex-VAT, or 360 basically ink VAT. And yeah, it is a very nifty little portable light, perfect for backlights. Just runs off MPF batteries or USB power. That's it for new products. The only other thing I wanted to show you really was the second-hand bit of the website, because I think I've been asked by the sales team to show you this because the second-hand often gets overlooked a little bit on our website compared to all of our new sales, but we do sell lots of second-hand equipment as well. And we've got quite a lot of quite interesting things in at the moment. We've got an FX9, Red Ranger, XF705, some pocket cameras, 1DXs, Bird Dog PCZs, which are so popular at the moment because of the COVID pandemic, of course. And these are boxed brand new, basically, for a little bit, about 400 or 500 quid cheaper than brand new ones. Got an A7 III there, an old FS5, an FS7. You know, there's lots of interesting stuff in here. And of course, it's not just cameras. There's a whole load of things. There's lights, there's audio equipment, tripods, lots of stuff. So yeah, if you want to save a bit of money on any equipment, this is a good place to head over. It all comes with a new warranty from us and all the rest of it. So definitely worth checking out if you want to save yourself a bit of money on some new equipment. Grab yourself a bargain. So let's have a little look at what questions people have got. Okay, Andy has said, hi Carl, any tests between the A1 in 8K compared to the A7S Mark III in 4K? I didn't do any direct side-by-sides, Andy, but from what I can tell you, from what I've seen of the 8K footage so far on that, it looks maybe a little bit cleaner and sharper at normal ISO levels. And so I think potentially in a normal lit scene like that, I haven't done any dynamic range tests. The A7S might have more dynamic range, but in terms of a shot like this one, for example, where the dynamic range isn't that much, I think the 8K from the A1 would be a better, sharper, nicer image than the 4K from the A7S Mark III. And actually the 4K normal from the A1 does seem to match really quite well the 4K from the A7S Mark III. So yeah, I was so impressed by the quality of the video modes in the A1. I really was not expecting them to be anywhere near as good as they are. So Dan the Man Porto says, best laptop to edit R3D, so Red's RAW files. Really, you probably want Windows. I don't think the new M1 Macs work too well with R3D, simply because they haven't got the graphics grunt at the moment. Once Apple release M1 Macs with more dedicated graphic cards, like the MacBook Pro lineup, for example, the 15-inch, or whatever they might do with new iMacs or anything like that, those might be really quite good for things like Red R3D. But at the moment, you're probably going to want Windows, and you're probably going to want something with as decent a graphics as possible. So lots of people pick gaming laptops, like Razer laptops are very popular for Red. There's also I think it's a XP, a Dell one, which is really popular. I can't remember what it's called. The place to go for advice, though, because R3D is such a particular codec, and people that are really into that Red ecosystem do pay a lot of attention to what laptops and what graphics cards in particular. It's all about that graphics card with Red footage. Which ones work best is reduser.com. There's a huge resource on there of users, and they're talking about things like editing and graphics cards and laptops all the time. So I bet you won't even need to ask. I bet all the information will already be on there. There's a whole post-production section of the forum on there. So it's reduser.com if you don't already head to it. Okay, Marshall is saying, which Canon EF to RF adapter works with EFS lenses for use on the C70? So just the normal ones. So the normal EF to RF adapter, the sort of cheapest one that comes with it, or the slightly more expensive one that comes with the control ring on it, they will work perfectly fine with EFS lenses, and they'll cover the sense of the C70. The one that you absolutely can't use with them is the focal reducer. The 0.71 focal reducer just will not work. Because of the glass optics in there. EFS has glass that extrudes in the middle of it, and that will just clash in the way. Please do not try and put an EFS lens onto that focal reducer adapter. You'll damage the adapter or the lens, or probably both. So plus it wouldn't work because all EFS lenses are Super 35, so you would just end up, even if it did fit, you'd just end up with an image with massive vignetting on it. So there is literally no point in even trying to do that. If you've got EFS lenses and the C70, you want the just normal straight pass-through EF to RF adapter, or the one with the control ring. I wouldn't use the one with the ND filters either, I'd imagine, although it probably is fine. It's just another thing in between mounts which could get in the way of the glass. You find some EFS lenses extrude more than others as well. So with something like I wouldn't use any of them with the focal reducer one, but with the ND one, you'll probably find that some of them work okay, but some of them might touch the ND, which you need to watch out for. So to be safe, I would just use the normal ones, or of course, full frame EF lenses. Okay. Dun, dun, dun. Jeff is asking about the Atomos, saying, will there be a kit with the SDI module and the dummy battery? Yes, absolutely. That is the Pro kit on the website. So this Pro kit, which is a really good price actually, just under $1,000 all in, that comes with the Ninja 5, the SDI, the raw SDI activation module, and this dummy battery cable down here, which goes from the dummy battery on the back of the SDI into a DTAP cable port, plus the sun hood, of course. So that is the kit with everything you need in it. Okay, Simbad is saying that's great with the Ninja 5 recording in SDI, but I feel external recording from the FX6 will only really be worth it whenever Atomos comes out with a 16-bit 5 or 17 inches recorder or enables the Shogun to do so. Right, I don't necessarily agree with that. The way that works is that it is turning 16-bit linear into 12-bit log. So although I'm going to use the phrase only 12-bit, I mean 12-bit is enough for any sort of work out there really, unless you're in the most demanding situations you possibly can be. Any visual effects or green screen or all the rest of it should be fine with 12-bit. Certainly any color grading should be fine with 12-bit. The 16-bit linear is about the same in terms of quality as 12-bit log, and that's hence the conversion. Why it has to convert it and why it's a better idea to convert it is way beyond my knowledge. We need somebody like Alistair Chapman on here to explain all of that. He has explained it on a ProAV Live session before. I can't remember which one, but that could be something we could get him on to talk about, since the FX6 and the FX9 are so popular with these recorders. And I do see a lot of people just asking for 16-bit, but the bit that people are forgetting about is that linear and log. The two are not equal at all, and 16-bit linear is about the same as 12-bit log from my understanding of it. So yeah, the 12-bit log recording in ProRes RAW on the Ninja 5 is absolutely worth doing with the FX6 or the FX9. It really does unlock more potential of the camera. It gives you a RAW codec, which is the only way that we can do it with those cameras. It is absolutely, and it's a much better RAW workflow than and RAW format, RAW output, than the older way that they did it on the FS700 and the FS7, which was FS RAW. That tended to get quite noisy in the shadows. This one doesn't anywhere near as much. It's not the same system if anyone is used to that. In fact, actual FS RAW won't work with the Ninja 5. So if any of you out there have an older FS700 with a RAW activation, or the FS7 or the FS5 and 5 Mark II, the Ninja 5 won't record that. You will still need the Shogun for that, because that FS RAW is a different format and they haven't enabled it on this. The 12-bit ProRes RAW on these Ninja 5s and the Shogun 7s are absolutely brilliant quality. They really are. So hopefully that puts your mind to rest a little bit, Sinbad. I know it gets confusing. 16-bit should be way better than 12-bit. I mean, and things like Red, for example, is pretty much the only thing out there that will record actual 16-bit, which you can use. Some of the high-end Sonys do, like believe the Venice does in XOCN, things like that. But for the most part, Reds are really the most common way of shooting 16-bit. But apart from that, it's fine. And 12-bit is 10-bit is more 8-bit is really quite limiting. 10-bit is more than enough for most work. 12-bit is definitely enough for even high-end work. 16-bit is just in case, you know. Okay. Alex Giles. Hello, Alex. Any suggestions for a versatile shotgun microphone to boom for a short film with both internal dialogue in an untreated living room and kitchen space and outdoors on a bridge? Budget around £500. Okay, all sorts of options you could go for that. Let's have a little look at the Shogun. It's because we're talking about Atomos so much. The shotgun part of the website. So the MK416 is over budget for you, but this is pretty much the industry standard microphone for this sort of thing. You know, if any sound guy just has one microphone on the end of a boom pole, it's normally this one. So if you can push the budget that little bit further, this one is probably worth going for. But yes, it is above your budget if your budget is 500. If you need to hit that budget and you can't stretch any further, probably the NTG3, although actually looking at it, that's going to be slightly over budget as well. The NTG3 is basically Rode's version of the 416. It's just as good in most ways. So the it basically just sounds slightly different for the most part. It's not as weather resistant, I don't believe, and it sounds much bassier. So a lot of sound operators do prefer the way that the Sennheiser sounds. But to be honest, if you're just doing a short film dialogue and you don't want to do a huge amount of EQing to the sound from the NTG3 does sound really good. It makes voices sound quite nice because it's got that extra bass resonance. It can be quite flattering, if not that accurate, but quite flattering on a voice. So NTG3 could be a good one for you. Apart from that, you've just got the old classics. I mean, there's not really much in between that and ones like the MK600 from Sennheiser, the NTG2. NTG4 and 4 Plus I've never been a huge fan of, to be honest. I've never thought they sound that fantastic. They're more useful for the ergonomics of them. And then there's things like the NT5, which sound really good when you're indoors, but they won't sound that good when you're outdoors. So you could get an NTG 1 or 2 and then an NTG 5 and swap them indoors and outdoors, or you could just go all in one and get something like the NTG 3 or the Sennheiser 416 if your budget allows for it. That would be my advice. Okay. Andreas is saying the Dell XP15 is the laptop that I was thinking of. You're right, that's the XP one. That I think is pretty good nowadays, the newest ones for those, for red footage. But I'm a little bit out of touch there, to be honest. Definitely head over to reducer.com for the most up-to-date recommendations. Right, Jeff, for the kit, was meaning all of the stuff around the monitor. He already has the Ninja 5, but wants all the gubbins. Just get in touch with us. We can absolutely put you together a little quote, which will save you. Just email the sales inbox or pick up the phone and say, I want all the accessories from the Ninja Pro kit, but without the Ninja 5. And any of our sales team will just go, yep, here you go. I'll add this, and get it off to you. Nice and easy. Okay. And he replied to so Andy has come back with his HDMI Ninja 5 question, saying that you're annoyed that the FX6 can't do RAW over the HDMI like the A7S. Yes, absolutely. We haven't yet seen really what the difference is between the RAW from the HDMI on something like the A7S and the RAW from the SDI. Now, as far as I'm aware, they do work in different ways, and so I would assume there is a quality difference. So actually that would be quite an interesting side-by-side to do at some point, is take the, maybe just using the same Ninja 5, take the SDI RAW output, take the HDMI output from the A7S, because the A7S and the FX6 have such similar image quality to start with. That could be really interesting to see if there's much of a difference in terms of things like highlight recovery and pushing and pulling the codecs, or in terms of shadow noise, things like that. I'd be very interested to see if there's much of a difference there, because we haven't had that much information from Sony as to what the differences are. And RAW over HDMI is such a new thing that, to be honest, I never thought would even be possible to do. I'm still, to this day, a little skeptical of it, simply because I spent so many years convincing myself that that was impossible and we would never see RAW over HDMI. And now, in the last year or so, we've just seen this flood of cameras announce RAW over HDMI, and the Ninja 5 could just record all of them into ProRes RAW, and part of me still thinks it's too good to be true. So I would be quite interested. We've got a lot going on at the moment, so I don't think it's something we're going to be able to do anytime soon, unfortunately. But that would be something I would really love to do if we do find the time, is a test. Let me know if that's something that you'd be interested in seeing us do, because I am very curious to see if there are any differences there. Might also be something I could ask someone like Alistair Chapman about, or maybe film some tests and then invite Alistair Chapman to comment on them and things like that. Well, I'm sure we can figure something out to make some interesting content around that for you and answer the question. But yeah, at the moment, we don't know enough about the RAW over HDMI to know whether or not we should miss it on the FX6, because in theory, I'd expect the RAW over SDI to be better, but maybe I'm just basing that on prejudice. So who knows? In an ideal world, we'd have both. That would be great. Yeah, Andy says a side-by-side would be ace. Yep. Jeff says FX3 spilled the beans. I'm looking forward to that announcement if it is coming just as much as you guys. Don't worry. Okay. Right, Andrea says the NTG3 Rode is great, but be careful indoors in rooms with lots of echo reflection. That is just something you've got to be careful with shotgun microphones indoors anyway. That's why I say microphones like the NT5, so these compact condenser microphones up here, rather than a longer, like this MK70 would be a really bad choice. That would be the worst choice for indoor recording. It's the exact opposite. That's great for far away outdoor recording. Normally, the longer the microphone, the more rejection it has and the more tailored it is to outside use rather than inside use. And the shorter the microphone like that, the more tailored it is to inside. It's more complicated than that, but from a real basics advice standpoint, that's the way to think about it. With anything that is a middle ground, do it all, like a 416 or an NTG3, yet you're going to have struggles with reflection and echo coming off the ceilings. That would be brilliant. So really what you want is a pickup pattern like the ones on the NT5, or there's I think it's the MKH40, the Sennheiser one. I can't quite remember the model number, but Sennheiser do a really good one as well. And there's a few other ones that some sound guys really, I think it's a Schweppes one, maybe. If anyone hasn't seen Curtis Judd's YouTube channel, I really recommend, for anything like this that's sound or microphone related, Curtis Judd is one of the best people making YouTube videos right now for that sort of really in-depth, informative, and he doesn't shy away from topics like microphone pickup patterns, which the vast majority of YouTube viewers are not interested in any way, shape or form. So he really doesn't shy away from those sorts of useful but kind of boring topics, and because of that is just a treasure trove of information for people like us that need to know these things. So yeah, definitely head over there if you haven't already, if you're interested in comparing microphones and pickup patterns and all the rest of it. Okay, Ariel says a really interesting point on the A1, which we don't know how this happens, but says, how can the A1 output full frame RAW in 4K from an 8K sensor? Because that implies that they're either downsampling 8K down to 4K in order to send it out as a RAW output, or it's pixel binning down to 4K and then sending it over a RAW output. Now, under normal rules of RAW recording, neither of those should technically be possible. So how they're doing it, I do not know. That's what you normally see in any cameras and things that can record RAW. If you drop down in resolution, you normally have to crop in to the sensor. That's the way that all the Reds work. It's the way that the Canons work. Any of those cameras with internal RAW recordings, you normally, and Blackmagic's do the same thing, you've got to crop in if you're dropping down the resolution, because downsampling and pixel binning or line skipping or anything like that just don't really work with RAW recordings. And yet the A1 can take its glorious big 8K sensor, or even larger than 8K sensor, and then give you a full frame RAW 4K output, which technically shouldn't be possible. So this is part of what I mean when I say things like we don't know enough about how that RAW over HDMI is working, because there's a few things like that which just come as really unexpected surprises and go, hang on, I want to know a little bit more. I want a few people to test things like that before I really go all in on that's amazing, because there's a few question marks there to be answered. Because I haven't actually tested that RAW output at all. We didn't turn it on when we had the camera here, because we only had it for 24 hours and we had to make a full video with it and do other tests. So we just didn't have time. So we will look at it, but it does need someone a bit more clued up in terms of camera technology and a bit more of an engineering mind than mine, unfortunately. So I'm very much looking forward to knowing more, but that is exactly the sort of thing I'm talking about. Okay, Reginald. I've always wanted a smaller recorder to pair with the Sony FS700R. The Ninja 5 with SDI module would be perfect, but I doubt they'll make it compatible with older cameras. You're right, I don't think they will. Currently it's not compatible. They've made a big point of saying it is not compatible with FS RAW, like on the FS700, so I just don't think it's happening. If you've still got an FS700, though, I really do think you should look at upgrading to something like the FX6 or the A7S, or perhaps whatever this FX3 is will be the one for you. But we're seeing new cameras from Sony now with such good features at such good price points, like the A7S Mark III. And they aren't just a decent step up, they're a huge step up in quality over a camera like the FS700 in terms of ergonomics, features, frame rates, but most importantly, image quality and color performance and dynamic range. They are a big, big leap forward. So I really would be thinking now about upgrading a camera like the FS700. Obviously take that with a pinch of salt because we're a dealer, but my advice would definitely be with a camera like that to be trying to save the pennies up to upgrade it, because you will massively see the benefits from doing that. Bruno, moving away from the FX3 speculations, any speculation about the Blackmagic announcement? Again, same rules apply. I either don't know anything, or if I'm under an embargo on NDA, I'm not allowed to tell you. So, let me go Blackmagic announcement. Let's see. So this, I think, is what they've done. What's new with A10 Mini and cameras on the 18th of February. So that's in 3 days' time. So yeah, that could be quite exciting. Who knows? Who knows? It could be a couple of things. I mean, they do specify A10 Mini, and so anything that changes in an A10 Mini would be a big deal. So that would be very exciting. I think my laptop feed has died, by the way, so we can't. It's because I've got it on the wrong screen. That's why. That does help. There we go. You should be able to see that now. So yeah, this is Blackmagic's tweet about the A10 Mini. So yeah, anything that's new in the A10 Mini world is big news. So yeah, I am very much looking forward to seeing what that is. Plus camera update. Could be new pocket cameras. Could be, I would love to see, they're in a bit of a strange one with their cameras now, because all of their studio cameras are getting a little bit long in the tooth. They've got the Ursa Mini Pro 12K, which is glorious sort of high-end cinema camera. Then they've got all the pocket cameras, which are also getting a little bit old. So they've got a lot of holes. It could really appear at any level. If it's a camera, it could be a studio camera, it could be a broadcast camera, it could be a small cinema camera like the Pockets, it could be a medium-sized cinema camera like something just beneath the Ursa Mini Pro 12K, something to fill the 4.6K kind of price range. Who knows? It could be any one of those things. So yeah, I am very excited about what that could be. Right, A. Jones Productions. I'm about to hit the button on a new camera from you guys. Great to hear. I have a selection of both Canon glass and Sony glass, and at the moment you run an FS5 and an A7S Mark II. Okay. I mean, it looks like you're pretty invested in the Canon and the Sony system. Obviously, if you move to Canon, you'll be able to use your Canon glass, depending on what your Canon glass is. But you won't be able to use your Sony glass at all. It just won't fit on any of those Canon cameras at all. Whereas if you go for a Sony camera like the FX6 or the A7S Mark III, both of which would be a big step up in image quality from the FS5 and A7S Mark II, you would be able to use all your Sony glass depending on what your Sony glass is, and you would be able to still use your Canon glass with an adapter, but you wouldn't get things like the autofocus. But you've got Sony glass, so never mind. I mean, you carry on to say, I'm not in love with the Sony color space and was thinking of changing to Canon, torn to flip a coin. Flip a coin for you. I'm not going to flip a coin, it's a big decision. But we are here to help, so just pick up the phone, let us know. You know, I can talk you through the options in a bit more detail. It does depend a little bit on what lenses you have. What I would say though is if the main reason that you're looking to go away from Sony to Canon is the color space, the new FX6, FX9, A7S Mark III, all of them have much better color performance than the FS5 and the A7S Mark II, so you would still see an improvement. But obviously the color space is still different and the color science is still different between Canon and Sony. So if you do prefer the Canon as a whole, I wouldn't necessarily say I blame you. The Canons would be great at that, but you would be looking at selling your Sony glass as well as your FS5 and A7S Mark II in order to fund the Canon, I suppose, and maybe put more money into RF glass or something like that. But yeah, pick up the phone, talk to our sales team, talk to me and the rest of the technical team. We can give you a bit of advice there on your particular equipment, and weigh up some pros and cons with you. Okay. So Alex says, sorry, you mentioned the NT5 for indoors microphone work. Would the NT-G5 be a good versatile option? It would be all right outdoors, but not great. You'd need to get it quite close to your subjects, which can be quite hard outdoors. NT-G3 or an NT-G2 or 1 would be better for outdoors than an NT-G5. And Tyler says, 1+1 for Curtis Judd, my go-to for audio info. Completely agree. Okay. Yeah, Jeff says that he just sold his FS700 and bought the FX6. 9 years young, the FS700. She didn't owe you a thing. Yeah, over 9 years, a camera like that, if you've been using it on a decent amount of jobs, more than paid for itself. How have you found, Jeff, the FX6 coming from the FS700? I'd be really interested to see what you specifically have noticed is a huge difference, because it's something that I lose perspective on a little bit, because I get to try out each of these new cameras, but only a little bit, if that makes sense, in each one. I lose some of that perspective of workhorse. This is my workhorse camera. This is the camera I know inside and out, and then have jumped to a new workhorse camera. And so I'm always really interested to hear on specific customers' jumps between one camera system to another. So yeah, let me know what has made a particular difference so far on the FX6 for you. I assume you can't have had it long if it's an FX6, so you probably had it for a month or two max, I'd imagine. So yeah, what are your first impressions like? Okay, Mitchell, what is a good microphone / field recorder setup for environment and nature videos? Ooh. You can use pretty much anything, to be honest. I mean, there's so many different ways to do that. I mean, it's difficult for me to give advice on that, because each sound operator has, and I've heard people go very adamantly for each different route. So there's different ways you could do it. For example, you could do the audio recorder is just an audio recorder. You look for an XLR recorder with very good preamps and good bit depth recording. So, like 16-bit, 13-bit, or anything like that. Float recording ideally would be lovely. Something like the sound devices or the big Tascams or the big Zooms will get you really great quality XLR recordings. Really, and a lot of the differences between those is personal preferences and how many microphones you need to connect and all the rest of it. Although the sound devices ones, the mix pre's are brilliant. The microphones is where it gets subjective. So there's two schools of thought, really. One is you just do a good mono recording and then you layer them and make stereo sound and make soundscapes in post by layering different mono sounds, and you record those mono sounds with shotgun microphones. That's the normal way to do it, if you like. That's the tried and tested. Sound operator goes from recording dialogue, then just heads off and records lots of Atomos by themselves. The other school of thought is to try and craft a soundscape around a live recording. So using a stereo microphone, or maybe several microphones all placed around different areas to do a sort of stereo mix in the recorder itself. There's two different ways to do it. To be honest, all are going to do a very good job. If you're a specific sound recordist, you're going to know more about that than me. Look on sound recording advice, talk to other sound operators in the field, and see which option you prefer. Certainly, a jack of all trades like me is not going to give you as good advice as a dedicated sound operator for obvious reasons. But yeah, those are the two sort of routes to be going down. And you can, as long as you know what you're doing in post-production, you can make some absolutely fantastic. And that's how pretty much every Hollywood film has ever been made, layering mono sound effects that are recorded with shotgun and condenser microphones. So I wouldn't shy away from just using the same microphones, but layering different sounds together in post. Okay. So Ariel says, thanks. The only camera I've seen recording lower res RAW was the Blackmagic 12K. So yes, like I was saying, RAW traditionally needs to downsample. The Blackmagic can do it, and that is because it is able to effectively pixel bin, but in a good way because of its RGB sensor. So it works in a very different way as a base technology. The end result's very similar, but the core technology that is capturing the images is doing so in a very, very different way than a traditional Bayer pattern. And so therefore they can do that. The A7S Mark III and the FX6 and all the rest of it, and the A1 in particular, they're a Bayer pattern. They don't do any of that stuff that the 12K. So yes, you're right, the 12K can do it. And you're right, that's the only camera I've seen as well that can do it. But that's because the technology is so dramatically different. Okay. Lester Camestra says, hoping for a small, extra small audio adapter for the FX6. Honestly, most of the time I wouldn't need a big top handle and I'd be happy to pay for the add-on. I completely agree. If we had something, let me bring up the FX6 as an image. FX6. Oh, FX65, that's a typo. So, if we look at the FX6 for a bit, so it has a data port back here that connects, and so that there's no cables going, or at least too much cables going for the sound. So there's still a cable going for the monitor, but there's no cables going to this sound bit, and that's through a data port down here. But that is not an MI shoe. So I keep using my mouse to point out things for you, but none of you can see that. So I don't know how I can point out bits, but you see the two thumb screws in the middle of the camera that's holding the top handle on. The data port is just behind those, but it's not an MI shoe. So if it was an MI shoe, you could use all sorts of different little audio adapters to go in. You could use the AXLR K3M, you could use the shotgun microphone, the camera top microphone that goes straight into it, or they could make a smaller one, but it isn't that. So what I would love to see Sony do, I don't think they ever will, but what I would love to see them do is make a little adapter, audio adapter that plugs down into that data port. So that's your camera, it goes down into it and then uses one of the thumb screws to secure into place, and then just gives you a 3.5mm input or one XLR input or something like that, just like this little hump on the back of the camera there where that data port is. I would love to see that. I think it would be a fantastic addition for gimbal work, for people like you that just want to lose the top handle and keep the camera nice and small, because then you could mount the LCD screen. You could either ditch the LCD screen and just use something like a gratical or an EVF of some sort, or mount the screen directly onto the front thumb screw and then use the back one to secure the audio adapter. It would be a fantastic little way of working, but I don't think they will ever do it, to be honest. I would love to see it though. I really would. Okay. Amped Life with Chris. Do you have any indication of what the C200 Mark II will be? As far as I'm aware, we're not going to see a C200 Mark II anytime soon. So who knows? I mean, Canon had a huge 2020, and Sony have always... They've had a bit of a quiet couple of years, and so right now they're in the middle of this just huge release of cameras and batch releasing everything. But Sony have always been a company that releases a lot of product. Canon have never been that. They've always been a camera company that's been a little bit more reserved and released new camera models every couple of years or so. Now, 2020 was a huge year for Canon. We saw the C300 Mark III right at the beginning of it, the C500 Mark II right at the end of the year before. Then their entire high-end cinema EOS lineup was replaced there. Then we've had the C70 come out, which replacing the lower end of the cinema EOS lineup. Then we've had the R5 and the R6 replacing the high end of the stills lineup. They basically replaced their entire sort of, apart from the entry-level models, they replaced their entire Canon lineup in 2020. And I would be very surprised if they had anything more imminently up their sleeves. But that being said, it is the same situation as all the other brands. Either I don't know anything, or I'm under NDA and can't tell you. So I guess that's not going to mean very much, is it, me saying that? But whether or not... I mean, it is difficult. I mean, Andreas is saying he expects the C200 Mark II to sit between a C300 Mark III and a C70, so probably around $6,500. But where would it sit in terms of specs? So how much do you strip away from the C300 Mark III to hit that spec point between the C70? Or is it just a C70 in a different body? Who knows? see, all these cameras are getting so similar in terms of specs now. It's getting really hard to draw the line between different models and say, well, that's the higher end model because it has this, and that's the lower end model because it has this. It's getting more and more difficult. Consti says, does it still make sense to buy a Sony f55 because the prices are dropping now? It depends what kind of work you do. If you're just looking for pure image quality and that's all you care about, probably not, because cameras like the FX6, even the A7S Mark III, they have fantastic image quality now that I would say, especially with their raw outputs, will rival the f55. Now, the main reason to go for the f55 is its ergonomics, its practicalities. If you do that sort of broadcast high-end work and you need the workflow features that the f55 gives you, then the f55 is unparalleled still. And so if you do that sort of work, absolutely it's still worth it, because none of their new cameras, even an FX9 or a Venice, even with an XDCA back and all the rest of it, they still don't quite do what the f55 does. So the f55 hasn't had a modern replacement in that type of style of work. It's still Sony's current camera. So yes, that specific kind of work, absolutely it's worth it. High-end broadcast, that sort of thing. If you're just trying to get the most image quality bang for your buck, I'd be looking at things like the FX6 now. Okay. So Marshall is saying, would the tentacle tracky work for the FX6 for Leicester? Yes, absolutely. The way the tentacle tracky works is that it just will sync together over timecode. So you'll need a tracky, which will be your recording unit. So that would normally be connected to a lav mic, or it could be connected to a boom if you've got the right sort of cabling. And that'll be recording on it with timecode. And then you'll have a Synchy as a separate product, which you use a Bluetooth app to sync the timecode together on those two, the tracky and the Synchy. That syncs together on the Bluetooth app. Sorry, I don't know why I found that so funny. The tracky and the Synchy. The Bluetooth app will sync those together. And then the Synchy will be mounted on top of your camera, and it will connect to the camera using the BNC port for timecode. So it will be feeding timecode out of the tentacle Synchy into the FX6, and then your audio recording and your camera feed will have the same timecode in post, and you can just match them up nice and easy. So yes, if that sort of external recording works for you, that is by far the best way to do it, and it will work brilliantly on an FX6. But if you want to record the sound directly in the FX6, it won't do that. So it is slightly different, but it is a setup that will work very well. Thank you very much for the suggestion, Marshall. And he's asking on the FX6, while we're on the FX6, preamps on the FX6 are much better than the XLR module added on the A7S Mark III. Sorry, are they better? Not saying that they are better. I haven't done a direct comparison. I think they are slightly better, but the ones in the K3M are pretty good. So if they are better, they're only a little bit better. I certainly wouldn't say it's a day and night difference, and I wouldn't, you know, between a external recorder, something like a Tascam or a Zoom or sound devices, or that tentacle tracky, the quality difference between using an external dedicated recorder like that and recording internally on either of them is now quite substantial, because those recorders have got so good. The FX6 and the A7S Mark III with the K3M both have fairly decent preamps, and I would say the FX6 is likely to be that little bit better, but you know, the difference isn't anywhere near as much as it is between an external recorder and those. But they are a lot better than if you're used to older mirrorless cameras which are recorded over the 3.5mm jack in. Definitely much better than those on both of them. Andrews is saying that he hopes some Palm camcorders will come out this year because the options out there seem to be a little dated. I could not agree more. The biggest thing I want to see in the camcorder market, and yes, camcorders aren't fashionable. Yes, people, they don't like talking about them as much as they do cinema cameras and mirrorless cameras. They are still very popular. They are still a very much needed area of the industry because they use smaller sensors. That 1-inch size sensor is sort of a maximum. And you want that in that kind of camcorder because that kind of camcorder is all about documenting what's in front of you. If it is more important that you capture what's in front of you and document it than it is that that thing looks good, then you want a camcorder. You don't really want an A7S Mark III or an FX6 or a C70 or a C300 Mark III or an EVA 1 or anything like that. You want a camcorder because you're just going to be able to have that built-in zoom range. You're going to be able to go from wide to tele in an instant. You're going to be able to just capture everything and everything's going to be in focus. You're not going to half catch that crucial thing, but it's out of focus and all the rest of it. It won't look as pretty, but you will capture it. So for journalism and anything like that, it is still the go-to route. Now, the biggest thing I want to see come to camcorders is this autofocus, because we've seen Canon do it for a long time, and Canon are the only camcorder brand that are doing this. In pretty much every Canon camcorder, all the way up to the XF705 and down to the XA40, they are putting their dual pixel autofocus system with a touchscreen control to make it really easy to get everything in focus and track focus and all the rest of it. So Canon are the ones doing it right in that, in my opinion. Sony made decent strides with it recently with the Z280 and the Z190, but really, to be honest with you, it was a halfway house on the autofocus front. You could turn face on and off and then it would work quite well, but you didn't have the object tracking and all the rest of it. Certainly nowhere near as capable as the A7S Mark III or the FX6 or any of these new cameras are. So I would absolutely love to see Sony bring that autofocus technology into their camcorder range. And for the other brands like JVC and Panasonic, their autofocus is still stuck in that contrast based where it hunts. And so it is just nowhere near as reliable. I really think the area where we're going to see this autofocus be the most useful is in this sort of camcorder market, particularly the 1-inch camcorder market. It is just such a fantastic technology for people doing that kind of work. Okay, Pal Faggot is recommending the Zooms as an audio recorder. So a Zoom F2 Bluetooth and a Zoom F6 with Bluetooth. Timecode from this also syncs with the Ninja 5 sync module as a master. Yep, absolutely. Zoom have ways to do it as well. And Andy says his sound man will be happy to hear that he's still in a job. Absolutely. South Coast is asking, will the Trackie work with mics like the Rode VideoMic NTG? Yep, absolutely. If it plugs in over a 3.5mm input, it will work. The only thing that things like the Trackie won't do is provide phantom power to some of the bigger microphones, like the ones we were talking about earlier, like the 416 and the NTG3 and all the rest of it. Won't work for that. So yeah, we've come to the end of the questions there, and we're just about nearing that 5 o'clock mark, so I think we will wrap it up there. But some fantastic questions for today. Thank you all so much for joining me. I do really enjoy these Q&A sessions, going backwards and forwards with you all. It's lovely to hear what you're all thinking about and what products you're paying attention to. It's great having this two-way feedback coming back. So yep, thank you so much for joining me. I really hope to see you in the next week's one as well. We do these every single Monday at the same time. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
How you capture audio for your video. For more information, visit sennheiser.com/xswd.
The new Super 35 sensor that Canon have introduced with the C300 Mark III is quite a big step up from other S35 sensors that they have created before. From the body and the flexibility that gives us in terms of the expansion packs and the interchangeable mount, to the sensor with its increased dynamic range for tackling scenes that possibly we couldn't have tackled or captured faithfully before, I can get more out of this camera. My money goes further. It's as simple as that from a business standpoint. From a creative point of view, it's unquestionably unlocking more creative avenues for us as filmmakers.